see I finished spraying the stock for the frames, and I've put 2 coats of General Finishes polyacrylic sprayed on the top surface and 1 on the back surface. Now these frames haven't been cut to size or mitered or assembled into a frame yet, so my idea for doing the pre-finishing is I really would like to, partly the finish is going to help hold it together for any blowout when I do the cuts for the miters. And since I already have color on here, I really want that to be clean. And then when I do the glue up, if there's any squeeze out, it'll be really easy to get rid of it without worrying about it getting into any of the curl. So it works out pretty easily this way. Now, after I do the assembly of the frame and it's all glued up, I'm going to go back and spray 1 final coat on the top surface, giving it its 3, which polyacrylic is generally done with 3 coats. And then I'll also do the back side 2 more times. Now the reason why I'll do 2 on the back is I only put 1 so far, but I'll be rabbiting this back section. So when I go to do the final 2 coats, that'll actually coat the inside of the rabbet, so the whole frame will be nice and sealed. Now when I originally set out to do this project, I thought it was just going to be a 1 weekend thing. Granted, I started midday on a Sunday, so I knew it was going to spill over to another weekend. But whenever something like that gets planned, work has to intervene. So I had absolutely no time in the shop in the last week or 2. But one of the things that happened is along the way I had this opportunity to pick up this Fuji Super 4 Special Edition HVLP. It's a 4-stage turbine, so it's basically pro caliber. I had a chance to get this, so I decided to go ahead and wait until it arrived so I could go and do the finishing on this frame. Granted, this isn't a real difficult thing to spray a finish on, but it's also a pretty good project for that exact reason, to try out this new gun. And I have to say, this is a fantastic system. I think it had a learning curve of about 8 seconds to learn all the controls and get that thing being able to dial in a really small finish and spray patterns and everything. It's exceptionally easy to use. Now, I've used for a number of years this conversion gun. It works off of a compressor. You've probably seen a few posts about it, especially for like the cup and the 3M PPS system. It works really well, but one of the things that's awkward about it is that it's really hard to dial in that initial spray. So you tend to spend a lot of time spraying on cardboard or whatever else, trying to dial it in. Once you have it dialed in, relative changes are pretty easy to do on the fly as you're spraying if you need to cut back or increase flow and things like that. But it's difficult to just set it and go. I find that when I was tinkering with this as a test, which of course means you load it up with a quart of water and you spray the driveway, when I did that, it was so easy to make the controls and the changes and even the dimensions that you were wanting for the spray pattern. It was just fantastic. So why am I bothering to bring this up in here? One of the things that I see a lot is a lot of people go and they look at some of the other turbines like the Erlex. Now the Erlex is, everybody said it's a fantastic machine. I've never used it, so no knocks against it. The lower end ones are pretty inexpensive, so they're easily in anybody's reach. If you're going for one of the more expensive models, though, it turns out you're really getting close to the price point of a unit like this. And this is, seriously, this is just, it's almost like a prosumer version of the Q4 system that Fuji puts out, which is really made for the pros. And the big difference between the two is just that the other one is quietized. They made it a little difference in the turbine, and then they quietized the case. So it's several dB quieter than this one here, but it's still pretty loud. You're going to want to put earring protection if you were working in a spray booth all day long. But for a hobbyist that does it, you know, fairly often, this is perfect, especially when you consider that the great outdoors is my spray booth. So I don't have any problems with echo inside the container. So you might want to give something like this a look, because this was just a fantastic gun to use for this project. Now, normally when I would cut a piece of molding, and in fact this is like a piece of molding, right? I would normally use the miter saw, partly because this is long, so it's a little awkward to be doing on a miter gauge on a table saw. And also if I was to use, say, the Festool MFT, typically the molding is beveled, so it's a little awkward to let it lay flat without using a compound angle, and who wants to do that? So, but the thing is that, of all things, I'm in Arizona, so how often does this happen? 20 minutes ago it started to rain outside. And my miter saw station being right near the garage door requires anything that's going to be cut where the stock is going to be, the keeper is on the right side, it sticks out in the driveway. So that's not going to work today. So what my option is going to be is I'm going to scoot these out of the way. And you've seen this probably on my MFT demo, is I'm just going to use the MFT's layout. This guide rail is set parallel to these dog holes here, and then the back fence is, of course, perpendicular to that, so it means it's parallel to these dog holes. So I'm just going to put these Qwas dogs here, I'm going to put them on a 45-degree line. And now I just register this straight up against that edge, slide it over to where I need the cut, and run the cut on the guide rail. Normally I have that little problem where this is a bevel and it makes it sort of an unclean cut, but in this case here it won't really be a problem because the top of this is flat. And in all honesty, I'm going to be cutting this upside down. Now the reason I cut this upside down here, as well as on the miter saw, is because the angle of the blade. As the blade rotates up into the stock, you're going to want it using the stock itself as a backer to keep the cut clean. So you're going to want this stock upside down so that the blade, as it's coming around, is going to come up into the stock. If you had the stock up this way here, you're pretty much guaranteed to get some blowout on the edges. Now an advantage of having pre-finished this is also that the finish itself is kind of gluing together the fibers, so you're going to get a lot less tear out on the edge as well. Now I've marked these boards with just some blue tape to indicate approximately where the beginning and ending of a piece is. So this one here is going to be one of the rails with the longer piece. I've also indicated the angle of the miter that I'm going to put on either end because in some cases there was maybe something that I want to avoid at the end, which is why I was trying to cherry pick the nicer parts in the middle of the board. Like this one here has a good example. There's a section down here at the bottom. It really doesn't fit in with the rest. So I'll be starting to cut here, and I've picked the angle actually to be able to eliminate one part of the spots that's in this pattern down here, because the other end of it is 59 inches away and is down here. So I need to make sure I can take all this into account. And it might have happened that when I've made a frame once before, I might have ended up with 3 rails in one style, just because of the way that I didn't mark it ahead of time. So I've marked the cuts on the top. One of the nice things about using, say, the Qwas dogs like I've outlined before for aligning your fence, and always using the exact same alignment stick, is that this cut, this cut's been there for like 2 years. It has never moved. So because I've realigned this table several times, but it's so accurate, that cut never widens out. So actually I can use it very much as an extremely accurate way of lining up the cut that I drew with a saddle square going down on the side. I can put it right on the edge of the kerf and make the cut. Now if you look at the tip of this, there isn't any blowout that happened on here. Partly the tape is holding it in place, so it does add a little bit of extra support. The other thing you would have noticed is that I was taking it, I tried to make it in 3 passes, mostly because I wanted to make it as a very light, shallow scoring pass, from the underside of course, on these beads, so that they were mostly cut away and there wouldn't be as much resistance when the final pass went through to take them out. And these are dead clean. I might have been able to get that on one pass, but why risk it? Today I'm doing the assembly of the frame, gluing it all up. Now the dominoes are all nicely fitted. Yesterday I did a little bit of sanding to flush a few little errors that I had and then re-dyed them. So they're all okay, especially when they get their final coat of finish on them. And to make the assembly easier, I didn't want to have to monkey with 4 corners being glued up. Miters are tough enough as it is that you don't need 4 of them all at once while epoxy is thickening, curing, and you have things maybe not level, things not tight enough. So it was a lot easier to do this piece as one, and then the other piece as one. So now all I have to do is these other diametrically opposed corners, and those are actually pretty easy to slide in together, especially when the other side is solid. So that's what I'm going to do today. I didn't film the one from last night because it was pretty easy. So I brought you in a little closer so you can see how this joint is going to go together and how we're going to do the glue up. Now, as I mentioned, these dominoes, I did leave myself a little bit of side-to-side motion room so that I can make sure the beads are nicely lined up. So I can't just, this isn't such a snug fit that I can push it in on either side, clamp it together, or just push it together and have the glue up come out great. That's almost the case with any miter anyway. So I'll leave this in here so you can see. So these are the miter stitches, a little more up close. Now the way that this works is that you're going to take a miter stitch, let me scoot this over so it's a little easier to balance, and you're going to clamp it to the side of this either rail or stile. So you're going to put a clamp across it here, and that's going to hold the miter stitch in place. Similarly, you're going to put another miter stitch on this side, and you're also going to clamp it. Now, of course, the joint is still wide open. Nothing has changed there. You haven't clamped the joint. But the difference is, now let me get one more piece of MDF here to support this miter stitch so you can see. What you're going to try doing then is you're going to put a clamp on these surfaces here that then are parallel to each other. So you put a clamp here, and as you clamp this together, it's going to pull it together. It's actually pushing the force straight through this joint across it as you would like. You always want the force to be perpendicular to where the joint line is. So I put a small hinge mortising bit in the MFK 700, and I've got it set to a depth of, you know, the mount that I have. If you put it here, there's just a little bit more room on the top because of the head of the screw. So this way here, we're going to get it flush to the top of to the back of the frame. And actually, I've tested this out on a piece of scrap, and with that amount left, the screws that come with this aren't going to poke through. So I have the painting mounted in the frame now and just propped it up here in my shop. So the shop will look good for the next 2 days before I go to deliver it. And I already know my friend's wife is not going to let him put it up on the wall, so I'll be taking care of that this weekend as well. Now the couple things I like about this, the way the project turned out at the end, is when I was doing the color matching at first, I used a scrap piece of maple, and I had also done some tests on the veneer samples since they were going to be glued down and you wouldn't see the tests. And that was to color the curl with black or to color the curl with double the blue. Now at the time, the black looked much better than doubled blue against this picture. I thought it would just complement it better, having the black and blue much like the main portrait. But now that I have it up here, I like it even better. So I'm really happy that I went with that choice. And the black beading that goes around it, I think, really adds a nice elegance to it. Gives it a little bit of a 3D on the side without being too pronounced. When I go to stores now and I see some of the larger prints like this in frames, sometimes the frames, they make them just these big monstrous, it's like they're trying to build up molding or something. It's to the point where you don't even see the picture anymore, so I really didn't want to go that route. So I'm very happy with it though. Came out great. Weekend project, my ass.